All right, in this video, we're going to look at the gradebook in Schoology. So I am in my Schoology Sandbox course that I have developed. And so on the left-hand side, I'm going to first look at the grade setup, and then we'll look at the gradebook itself. So before we get too far into here, let's just talk a little bit about checking with your district to see what things that they've already set up. So when you go in here, you might see things that are already determined for you that you might not even be able to change. If you don't see that, I would still probably suggest checking with your district to see if there's certain things that they want you to have. So what kind of categories might they want? Do they want your scales to be numeric or grade-based? There's just some different things that it might be good before you get too far into setting up a course, just checking if those things weren't predetermined for you when you get in here, just to make sure you don't get too far into the year and then have to go in and change a bunch of things. So just wanted to throw that out there at the very beginning, but let's just look and see what kind of options we have. So the first thing at the top is determining the categories for your course. So you can see I have a few things in here already. These of course could change depending on what you want. I can add a new category using that little plus add. So I can add a new category, determine if I want to calculate it by total points or percentage. I can drop the lowest grade. So this is something we see a little bit more often at, the college level, not so much in K-12, but that is an option. So if you want to drop, the 2 lowest quiz scores or something, you could set that up in here. I can also delete categories. So if I change my mind, there's a little X that shows up as you hover. So you can always delete. This gets a little interesting here. So the weight and then percentage. So I'm weighting the categories. The numbers here, I tend to just focus on the percent. So as you change a number here, this percentage will get recalculated. So if I say that the warm-ups are also worth 100, then everything changes so that they're equal weight. So you can kind of mess around with these numbers and decide what makes sense to you, but this percentage seems to make a little bit more sense to me. So, but you can change those as you see fit. The grading periods and final weights. So this a lot of times is determined by your district. So if I were to edit this, you're going to select grading periods that are probably set up already. If they're not, you can manage the periods and set them up yourself. But this would be something like districts will have, semester 1 of 2020, 2021, semester 2 of 2020, 2021, and then they'll have the dates that it starts and stops. So if they don't have that set up already for you, you can manage them here for yourself. Anywhere that you see a little question mark, so the grade setup has a lot of these, it's going to give you more information. So if you just hover over it, it will tell you, open up a little text box that just gives you a little bit more info. The next thing down is the final grade settings. How are you calculating grades? Are you rounding them? And then control grade columns in the gradebook. So there's just some different kind of options as you go through here. And then visibility settings. So do you want your students to be able to see the overall grade report or not? And then grading periods. And then this is one place that you do need to save your changes. And then on the far right side, there's also the different kinds of scales. Again, your district or your schools probably has that set up on what they would like you to use. And then, but you can add scales here if you have some flexibility. And then there's also a place to see what rubrics you've created and add rubrics directly from here as well. So once you have all of this set up, then you can go into your gradebook and look and see kind of what's in there and what options you have. So the grade setup and the gradebook are specific to each individual course. So if you have, 2 different, I'm teaching Algebra 1 and Geometry, I would need to set this up in my Algebra 1 courses as well as my Geometry. So this is not a universal setup. So from here, I can go into my gradebook, and now we can look around in here a bit. So all of my students are going to be listed on the left-hand side, and then across the top are all of my assignments, and then their overall calculated grade. So, and here it's just like a traditional grade book. They're going in reverse chronological order. So the newest thing is first. I can scroll back and forth across the bottom here. So as the year goes on, this list gets pretty big. Hovering over each individual cell, you'll see that there's quite a few things that I could change. So in here, I can go in and override a score. So if I decided that this example assignment, I graded it, I didn't score it when I graded it, but I want to go in and score it here, I can do that. So I can override any grades here in the gradebook. I can also, as I hover, two little things show up in the corner. So if I click on this little flag, there's excused, incomplete, and missing. So you can mark things, maybe it's a 0, or maybe you have some way to determine, but this is a nice way to just to keep track of kind of what's happening or why there might be a 0 or something in there. And then in the bottom right corner, there is a comment. So if for some reason, maybe you changed a grade after you had a conversation with a student, or something else, you could add a little comment, and then maybe I want to display that to students so that they can see it. And then that comment is just there. So I know for myself, there's sometimes that things get changed, and then a couple weeks later, someone has a question about it and I can't remember. So a comment is just a nice way to, as you're doing something, and then if you need it later, it's nice to just refer back to kind of why that change was made. So those two options are there. I can also go up and I can click on the assignment itself and it'll take me back to the assignment page and I can see individual student work. There's also the 3 buttons on the side. So I can edit, there's all kinds of things here. So if I want to do something where maybe it's just a quick check-in with students, they all did it, I could say set all grades, and then I could say everyone got 100, and it's not going to show up here because I only had one student, but it would fill in every student as 100. So that there's some settings in those 3 little dots to do things quickly. I can also, there's some other, mark all empty cells as a certain thing or view statistics. From here, I can also see, so it's calculating overall grades. I can also see students. If I click on this little, there's what looks like a little bar graph. If I click on that little bar graph, I get individual students' full grade report. So if you're meeting one-on-one with students or parents, families, or just for some reason, if you need this individual report, you can grab that from the gradebook as well. If I go back, across the top, I can also, these are different ways to sort the gradebook. So I can sort by grading periods, I can sort by types of materials. So maybe I'm at the end of a unit and I want to just look at all the check-ins that students did. I can just look at check-ins and my gradebook would be sorted in that way. I can also sort by due date. So this is ascending. You could do it reverse if you want, or when it was actually created. And I can also view by, maybe I just want to make sure that I'm not missing any student work. So I can say, maybe I want to look at anything that was marked missing and just make sure that I kept track of all of those things that students were turning in. So just different ways to sort materials up here at the top in Gradebook. And then lastly, we'll just look at these few options over here. So the plus sign is where I can add assignments, discussions, tests and quizzes. Just a quick reminder that you can also add those. You're probably most likely adding those through the materials section of the course, but there are some options. If you want to throw something in there really quick from this page, you can do it here as well. The 3 little dots. Here's where if you want to print a report, you can do that from this page. You can also export your grades. So if for some reason maybe you're keeping track of grades in here, but you need to pull the grades into another platform or system, you can export here as well. So if I click on that button, I can export as a CSV. And then there is a CSV for import into other systems. So that's getting a little bit more complicated, but just know that that option is there for those of you that might be interested. And then lastly, this last little icon is the toggle full screen. So as you go throughout the year, this list will probably get pretty big. So if you don't have enough room here, you can of course scroll left and right, But if you want a little bit more space and your monitor is pretty big, if you toggle full screen, the whole screen will be taken up by the gradebook. So I mentioned it just a second ago, a little bit about where you're keeping grades and if they're being pulled. So another great question to talk with your district. Schoology does have the ability to integrate into something like a Skyward, but that has to be set up by your district. So if your district has that set up, you might not have to worry about Skyward at all. Maybe that's already integrated, but you might also be using this as just kind of like the the old paper version, and then you're going to enter it into Skyward later. So you'll have to talk with your district to see how that's set up. But there is some options potentially for Skyward and Schoology to talk to one another. So that covers Gradebook. So just to wrap it up, you want to make sure you do your grade setup first, and then you can start working in your Gradebook to keep track of student progress.